Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and Future Tech Health podcast, and I have Troy Hickerson with me. He's the co-founder of ActiveForGood.com. So, Troy, thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah, tell me what's Active for Good about? What's the premise?
Good question. It's we got started with a mission to help malnourished kids, and that really led us to trying to come up with an innovative solution, and really this idea of connecting our own health and wellness to the health of someone else we may have never met. And so really this concept that, about a third of U.S. population is considered obese according to the National Institutes of Health, and about 1/4 of kids in the developing world are malnourished. And so this concept of kind of connecting those two things together and try to solve both problems at the same time. And the way we do that now too, to say that, the way we do that is by running a series of programs that inspire people to be active. Their activity sponsored, so kind of every calorie they burn, in a sense, turns into a calorie of food for malnourished kids, and then it provides a kind of a layer of motivation that might not be there for you to do something just for yourself. We all have a long list of those things, and by connecting people on teams in a social environment and really appealing to the sense of something bigger than yourself, and a concept that you can actually make a difference in the world just with the steps you take and the choices you make on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's a really good connection. That makes a lot of sense. That'd be very motivating. Well, what's the background of the idea? How did you decide to get into this?
Yeah, so I think every business story has a personal story, and for me, I had run a tech consulting company here in Southern California for about 10 years, and took a year off when my kids were still young, and we traveled and lived abroad, but lived in places like Nicaragua and Africa, and got a chance to see up close and meet people, and as I turned 40 at the same time and realized my breaths and heartbeats are limited, and what do we want to do to spend the rest of those on this planet? And really, me along with a couple friends, we decided to focus on kids that are really on the edge, the most severely malnourished kids. And one of the reasons why is it didn't need a new invention or medical breakthrough to help these kids. It really just needed some discipline and creativity to figure out how to bring a solution to them at scale. And at the time, there's a product called RUTF, which stands for Ready to Use Therapeutic Food, and it's for kids under 6 that are right on the edge and need immediate intervention. And you can imagine where these situations are like, and there are places like Africa, Latin America, Asia, even parts of the Middle East, where kids may be displaced and have kind of reached a point of no return where local foods wouldn't sustain them, and they've stopped eating, and they're kind of brought into a medical setting. And so these little 500 calorie packets of superfood, they're essentially a fortified peanut butter that have all the milk proteins and lipids that you need in there, and macronutrients. And it revolutionized the treatment of these kids, where most of them used to, at that point, not make it and be stuck in a hospital bed with a feeding tube. Now they can be home with mom, needs no refrigeration, no mixture with water. So that was back in 2011. We opened a factory as a kind of a sister nonprofit company and called Man and Nutrition, and that factory's in Georgia. And we showed up as part of the global supply chain to aid organizations like UNICEF and USAID that procure this. And then it's distributed by groups like Doctors Without Borders and Save the Children and whatnot. So that was really the first big step, was to get in and lower the cost of this intervention for kids. And we were able to, I like to think that we were a big part of lowering that. As much as 40% of the cost went away when there was some competition that had scale. And then by 2014, we were, doing all right as a factory and met our goals to our funders, and had some wiggle room to come up with more ideas to essentially take the fixed funding for food aid for these types of kids which covers about a third of them, and how do we cover the next two thirds? And as good and right as donations and government aid are, we thought we needed a more creative solution, and so we turned to lots of ideas, lots of bad ideas, and some good ideas, hopefully. And that's where this idea of connecting our activity to help kids was born.
So literally, how does it work? If someone is interested in the program, what do they do, and what steps do they take, literally?
They can go to activeforgood.com, and at activeforgood.com, we have a public way you could sign up and get interested. And where we found the most traction is with employer groups. So this idea that you could go to your wellness team or your HR person and say, here's a more creative way to have us all get active, which is in the best interest of everyone. Productive employees want to be healthy, as well as the employer, who often shoulders the healthcare costs. And there's funds available for those programs. And it's about a $30. Really, the program can vary based on the size of the company, but we'll play with that number for now. But per participant, and it's a 30-day program, and people are on teams. It's as easy as downloading an app to get started. You have an event code for your group, and all of your activity is tracked through things like Apple Health Kit on all your iPhones or Google Fit on your phones, as well as being able to connect to Garmin or Fitbit or other types of devices. So everything counts. You earn it's a point system that lets you feel like people care about the competition, and so the competition is interesting and the leaderboard is real. And so there's ways you earn points, and every 500 points represents a 500 calorie packet of food for kids. And one of the things that's nice is you're unlocking a meal, and everyone relates to a meal. Everyone's hopefully been hungry, and versus dollars that you're not always sure what that means or where does it go. And so these meals were able to tell you exactly where they go and the impact that they're making for those communities and kids.
So how do you choose which kids you're going to help, what countries, what circumstances?
Yeah, great question. Living in the world we live in now, we know where there's issues. We know where there's famine that's about to break out. We know where there's been issues with food insecurity, as well as things that contribute to that, like weather patterns and dry seasons and whatnot. So there's some great aid organizations. A lot of them are organized through UNICEF. They're the emergency group for any children's issues. And so then those same groups that have these holistic programs on the ground helping these communities that are most affected, they get a certain allotment of products of the same ready-to-use therapeutic food. They get an allotment of it. It's often called RUTF, and then they have gaps. So we work with groups like Save the Children and World Vision, and to fill the gaps that they have where their kind of allotment from UNICEF didn't cover the specific need. So that's kind of what we do. And so, there's a number of they go over by container, and a container represents, I think, about 163,000 meals per 20-foot container.
Wow.
Yeah, and those get shipped where they're needed. And occasionally we know far enough in advance where we run a challenge and where the product's going to go. Sometimes we wait till afterwards and maybe aggregate meals from a few different challenges, and then we're able to tell you exactly where it went and the impact it made.
Well, the tough thing, though, is anytime you wait, that could mean that some kid's not going to make it or something, right?
Yeah, it's hard. You've got to get ahead of it. And like with a lot of things, there's seasons, and there's seasons when it's most needed, which are typically between the harvest periods. So if you imagine, more subsistence farming environments, how long does the harvest that you had after last rainy season and you were able to harvest, how does it last? And so in that season is where we try to get product where it needs to go ahead of time. But yeah, the lack of product is really sad. And they have these great programs. They're called CMAM, which stands for Community Management of Acute Malnutrition. So it's not just dropping off packets of food, but it's really an integrated program to understand some root causes and try to help these families, especially when it comes to taking care of the kids. If you're an adult listening to this, we got a lot of reserve that, and our brain is developed and our organs are developed. But if you're under 6, in particular, your brain development is so key, and so getting nutrition could mean a kind of a stunted state that you can't recover from if you miss that window. So that's why we made this our cause, and are going from there.
So what are some of the trends that you've seen over the years, and what's happening right now? What do you see changing?
One of the things that we didn't expect was, because again, we got started with a mission to help kids, and then the more we got into this, we realized that this sense of empowerment for people to participate and make a difference is a very real thing. So we run programs for adults, like I mentioned, with companies, and then we also partnered with our idea to launch a program called UNICEF Kid Power, and that's for kids that are in 3rd through 6th grade, and then we also run some things for high school students. And we just finished a high school program, and it's amazing to watch student leaders run the entire program, understand the impact it's making, inspire their other students at their school to have a school-wide initiative. And I think the idea that these kids in particular can have an early experience of really, being part of the change that they'd like to see in the world. And I really look forward to seeing how that sense of empowerment and even kind of social emotional learning, as they call it, will go on to become a real valuable thing in this type of program.
And do you have kids in the U.S. that are doing a program for kids overseas? I mean, linking.
We do. Yeah,
kids
absolutely.
To kids might be really cool,
Yep, we sure do. So we have that happening as a teacher-led initiative in elementary schools, and then as a student-led initiative in high schools. It's really, in a sense, kind of limited. We'll have local businesses that will sponsor a high school, for example, to get active for good, and the kids could run with the whole program. Kids are masters of technology and really have clung to this well, especially in that high school age. It's easy for them to run the whole program. Now, I would say too, another on the other side of the impact you make for malnourished kids is this is a really good news story. It used to be that more kids suffered from malnutrition, and every year that goes by, that number has been decreasing, which is amazing. And I know the news is full of lots of headlines, but on a just a pure fact scale, the severely malnourished kids, that number is going down, and it's something that we could see go away. Hunger is a bigger thing, and that's always going to be with us. And there's all kinds of complex issues related to, food security. But the kids that aren't going to make it, we could definitely put a solution in place for that.
And how long have you been running the program? And have you gotten feedback? Many of the kids you helped early on that are maybe now grown.
Yeah, we sure have. We ran our first trials with the partner company Mana Nutrition in Rwanda. And that was about 6 years ago. And this last year, it was about a summer ago, got to go back and see those kids. One of our team members went, or a couple of our team members went, and it wasn't me personally, but to see those kids 6 years later was amazing, and it's a lot more different. We were behind our laptops a lot and can feel far away from it to be there in person. And we try to have a trip where some team members can go every year and see that impact firsthand.
Very good. So what's ahead for the next year for the organization? What's new and coming?
For us, I think the big thing will be making it more accessible to people to do on their own. So a public-facing challenge that they could join is going to be, I think, another way to get more traction. So that's ahead for us, and continuing to work with companies to run more challenges. So. All
right, very good. So people should go to activeforgood.com, or should they just go straight for the app, or what's the call to action here?
At this point, they go to activeforgood.com. So you need to set up a challenge in order to join. So the first thing you do on the app is join a challenge with a unique challenge code. But if you go to activeforgood.com, all the info is there to learn more about it and either start your own challenge or nudge that into your HR department and see if something can happen at your workplace.
Well, that's great. Well, Troy, thanks for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for the time. Take care.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.